Hello and welcome to the Earth Observed podcast, a podcast where I sit down with the founders, the technical leaders, and the minds shaping the future of Earth data, geospatial technology, atmospheric AI across Europe, North America, and beyond. In each episode, we take a vertical dive into a topic chosen by our guest, giving you a front row seat to the ideas, the tools, and the challenges that enable innovation from space to subsurface and everything in between. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Mike Spaeth, Global VP at the United States Artificial Intelligence Institute, where he drives global strategy, partnerships, and AI workforce transformation. With over 2 decades in AI, he's led initiatives at IBM, Moody's, and multiple startups, and has worked with the likes of Microsoft, Google, and IBM on advancing generative AI. Earlier, he shaped US policy as a legislative associate for Senator Frank Lautenberg and campaign leader for Clinton Gore. And despite being an Arsenal fan, I do have a lot of time, Mike. Mike, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Well, Sam, doing very well, and appreciate the opportunity and our conversation before getting on the call regarding Arsenal and Tottenham is a separate podcast we can do, because I'm a Arsenal fan, you're a Tottenham fan, and I think
Absolutely.
I think that
You know what? We set those two things aside. We could certainly chew a lot of fat on transfers, players, how players are maybe overpaid, attitude to players, and everything else. I think me and you could probably put the world to right. But yes, for those watching today, we are going to be, giving a nod to Earth observation. So don't worry, you are very much in the right place. So, kicking things off, as you've mentioned, we've had lots and lots of chats prior to the podcast today. But I'm just keen to understand. Being the person you are within the industry, very influential. Very sought after. What excites you the most about the intersection of AI, geo AI, and workforce development? And I guess, how do you see it reshaping industries over the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, well, on the Earth AI side, I'm very excited because it's kind of crossed from R&D to more operational, taking into consideration the EO foundation models and digital twins. I think we're getting to the point where some of this data could be now the rails of decision making. And, I'm currently at the United States Artificial Intelligence Institute, but before that, I was at Earth Daily. In addition to, prior to Earth Daily, I was at Maxar. So I had a good understanding of the value of EO data. And then, obviously in that magic moment and with ChatGPT and OpenAI in 2022, it then became clear that potentially you have a massive data set from satellites that can be used for foundation models to be able to train the models. So, that was very exciting to me. But what I also saw was the opportunity to train, citizens, students, employees as a starting point, right? If you don't have the knowledge in AI, it doesn't matter how powerful the models are. If you haven't trained your workforce or your students or your citizens, it kind of, needs to be done before. So at Earth Daily and at Maxar, I was really focusing on Earth AI. What I've done now is gone into the, kind of the ground level to make sure that, citizen students are upskilled and really not left behind. And that's kind of what we're doing at the U.S. Artificial Intelligence Institute. So it kind of ties into, the work I've done with Google and Microsoft, as you mentioned, on the EO side. But it all, currently I'm working more with universities in addition to countries on their efforts within AI. So there is an intersection there, and then that's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I actually recorded an episode this morning, not necessarily about this particular topic, but about the fact that it's good bringing geospatial data, platforms, tooling, and solutions to the forefront and making people aware of what it can do for you. And I think the exact same applies to um, accessibility of such data, especially to those less economically developed countries. Um, what is the accessibility? What is the usability of this data? What sort of work and initiatives and programs do we need to be offering in giving them the necessary guidance, intuition, and education to be able to ultimately use what they are being given, to its best potential. You've worked with global organizations across education, government, and enterprise. What makes a partnership truly successful in scaling AI training and certifications?
Well, yeah, and I think you made a great point, right? We don't want AI, we don't want Earth observation to be like a north-south advantage for countries. So one of the things I'm working on and have worked on within EO is providing data, providing training for countries in Africa, Central America, South America, because EO data can be used anywhere in addition to AI. So making sure people have access to Earth observation data, the output of Earth data with AI, and then they have the actual training to be able to understand AI, be able to prompt, be able to work with the data to kind of, be competitive in the workforce and really have that, competitive advantage as a individual, as a student, and as a country.
What we've got as well is two very complex matters, not just AI, but also satellite data. Understanding what it can do, very much the same as AI. So really, we've got two battles on our hands, or two tasks on our hands, in being able to merge them both. I also think as well that um, we need to aid this particular situation at its source. And what I mean by that is education, academia. And I'm not necessarily just talking about universities, I'm talking more advanced studies. I really think it's important to start incorporating those details into uh, into curriculum moving forward. I guess on a more personal note, so your career spans geospatial intelligence, sustainability, and now AI education, which is fantastic, by the way. But I'm interested to know what common thread ties these experiences together.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier is around how difficult those different areas are in enabling people to understand them and take advantage of them. So when you look at satellite data, when you look at AI foundation models, I think in the similarity of both is that they're not necessarily accessible for many reasons. Like, for example, in the satellite industry, it's complex and there's a lot of buzzwords, just like in AI. And those buzzwords are understood by somebody like you and me, but not necessarily the general population. When I was in the, EO space, people love to talk about the veneer and sphere and the bands of the satellites and 30 centimeter and 5 centimeter and the hyperspectral. These were all terms that we understood, but yet nobody else did outside of this small community. And it's the same way on the AI side. When you look at terms like AI hallucinations and AI training, these are terms that not everybody needs to or even wants to understand. But, you know, these industries, AI and the geospatial industry, have to understand this. Otherwise, it's a boundary. In a lot of ways, I found it frustrating. I came from prior to, as you're mentioning, also sustainability, prior to Maxar and Earth Daily and now USAII. I came from the risk side. I'm based in New York, so I work closely with financial service institutions, around determining risk, no matter what it was, climate risk, physical climate risk, whether it was financial risk, whether it was things like anti-money laundering, KYC, financial service risk about knowing your customer. So in these cases, one of the things that, I wanted to see is that, coming from risk, I understood that satellite data could mitigate risk because you're actually seeing what's happening. And I also understand, AI has the ability to provide insight to mitigate risk. But these two industries make it too difficult for people to participate and understand. When you look at the, EO industry, you and I talked about it. It's basically, a few companies that have the same employees that have talked about the same thing for 20 years, right? There's not a lot of new people in the industry. So it's basically people work, everybody works for the same set of different companies over and over again. So there's not a lot of new blood or inclusion in the industry. So, that becomes frustrating. It was frustrating for me.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And the thing is, I've spoken to quite a few different initiatives, programs, organizations, nonprofits who have come to me to talk about what can we do to ultimately nurture and kind of lure more talent into this particular space. And because, of course, naturally people want to be in tech, but there are other areas just as exciting that people also venture into. There are also other areas that maybe pay better in terms of compensation. It all depends on the type of person you are, naturally. But one piece of advice I give to these people is, rather than making things more complex for people to kind of come into the industry, you need to make things a lot easier. Ultimately, I see geospatial at times as this massive vanity project. It's like, well, look at all of these bells and whistles. Look at what we can do. And people don't really understand what it is that they can do. It just somewhat makes sense and looks pretty cool. And that's why I like low code, no code platforms. That's why I like easy to use, easy to understand, intuitive tooling platforms that answer solutions very, very easily, very, very efficiently. And I think it's those businesses that are able to aim for that and to meet that. I think they are the ones who will go on to continue to win. So yeah, it's frustrating for me as well. It's very frustrating for me as well.
Yeah, I think I was going to say, you used an interesting term, a vanity project. In a lot of ways, it seems like they both are, both EO and AI. They use terms that they know other people won't understand.
Yeah,
They are not
absolutely.
necessarily the easiest people to work with. They don't want to necessarily bring other people into the group. And it's almost like, oh, I know about AI and you don't, or oh, I
Yeah,
know about satellites and you don't, right? It's almost like this vanity, almost arrogance, which I think needs to change, right? Because there's so many use cases and so many applications of both. It should be, it should be made easier and to be more accessible, but it hasn't been that way. And even for, when you look at both, it's for 20 plus years, right? AI is not new. Obviously, satellite data is not new. So basically, for the past 30 years, they kept both of them, in a in a small elite group of of people who could comprehend and understand and didn't encourage it to being mainstream.
Yeah, at a time where we are in, I'd say, a momentum phase, we as an industry need to, as a collective, be doing what we can to influence people and to encourage people to join us in this particular wave rather than to deter them and make it seem like it's some VIP club. And that is anything from the solutions we build to the terminology in which we use, um, to the mentorship and the community that we're looking to offer. That's why I've, and I don't want to continue to bang my own drum, but that's why I do these podcasts, is to give people a real transparent overview of what people are doing, some of the projects that are in there, why someone should work in this industry, the cool people like yourself of whom they should be learning from. And I like that kind of no BS approach. It's authentic.
Yeah, AI can actually help the EO industry by making the data more accessible, right? In the past, companies who wanted to use it and understood the use cases, the data itself was too unwieldy. They needed too many eyeballs to be able to take advantage of the data, right? Why is the, defense or GEOINT the biggest user of satellite data? Well, they have the systems to digest it. They have the people to look at it, right? They've got, some countries have thousands and thousands of people that scour maps looking for change detection. They also have systems that have been built to digest this unwieldy data.
Hmm.
So AI has the ability to say, oh, okay, you don't have to have 100 people look at the data. You don't need to have large groups be able to digest the data and make it usable. So AI can help make it more prevalent. But once it, the industry is so slow moving that it's still taking a long way to get there. So for example, I worked with IBM and NASA on the Prithee model, and that was almost now 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago. And yet,
Nice.
you know, not enough not enough, process, not enough things have happened since then. You would think that, okay, you have AI that needs to digest data, digested the entire internet. Now it's looking for data. And then you're like, oh, okay, well, satellites data is massive, massive data set with data that can be very usable. You think that's a match made in heaven, but yet, it's just not happening fast enough. And that's kind of why I went into the geospatial EO industry, was coming from financial services on the risk side. Well, I was at Moody's prior to Maxar, and one of the things I thought satellite data could be used for is get a better understanding of what is actually happening out in the real world. An example that I give is at Moody's, I was doing ESG sustainability ratings for energy and oil and gas companies. And they were not transparent because they knew we couldn't go out there to the oil fields in the Permian Basin in Texas to determine if there were any issues or leaks, right? They knew it, right? What are we going to, they knew we're not going to jump in a truck and drive thousands of miles checking on all these locations. So I saw satellite data. It's like, oh, that'll solve this.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see, but yet it didn't solve it, right? It didn't, because the data wasn't usable by the financial service industry or the regulators or governments. They didn't have the people to actually look at the data. So there was a mismatch that maybe AI can solve. AI can solve, but yet the industry is not moving fast enough to be able to understand that's, the way the data can be used outside of the way the data is used today, which is basically, on the defense side.
Sure. That's amazing. Really interesting. You mentioned the model Prithee there. Um, From what I understand, it was developed in collaboration with IBM and NASA.
That's correct.
And yeah, and as it goes, I'm actually looking for a senior applied AI scientist in the UK at the moment, where not only are you going to be working on foundation models like Clay, but also Priffy as well. So I've been doing a bit of research into that, having a look at those who are contributing to these models on places like GitHub. Um, from someone who's actually been on the front line and has had exposure to this particular model, you've worked on it. You've worked with people who have been contributing and developing it in its sort of earlier days. What sort of things can you tell us about it? What was the journey like? What kind of, give us your experiences just for the next few minutes.
It led me to the understanding that there was this massive opportunity, right? I think IBM and NASA did a great job by just unveiling the concept to the community, right? To be able to say, wow, there's a massive use for satellite data with AI to be able to come with an output. So the fact that they even thought about the idea was the big win, right? And the fact that they've moved through different releases in different iterations. But now we're at the point where we need real world examples, right? And one of the things I found in the Earth observation industry is it's hard to find those, right? Outside of, hey, there's a tank there and it wasn't there yesterday, right? That use case has been solved. But outside of that, it's fuzzy. Now, the foundation models can help solve that, but yet we're not at the specific use case that says, I would not be able to use this data in the past, but now I can through this foundation model, and this is the use case, right? That's the spot we need to get to. But unfortunately, the satellite industry, EO industry, they look more at years than days or weeks or months, right? They look at, oh, this satellite will be launched in 2028. Other industries don't look at years. They look at quarters, months. But, it's a slow moving industry that's treating the AI, the fast moving AI industry in a similar way, which is unfortunate.
Sure. No, it makes complete sense. So, from an educational approach to AI and AI training, what are the biggest misconceptions companies or schools or non-profits have when they first approach AI training, and how do you help them overcome those?
Well, surprisingly, you still hear people say, we're not ready yet for AI, or, oh, it's on the roadmap and we'll get there. Or, I haven't tried it yet, but I know I will. And, it's shocking, because everything's moving so fast, right? Everything changes daily. Months are being compacted into a day. Things will be different in 6 months. Things may be dramatically different in a year. So there's still this, concern. And I'm even hearing it. I speak with, educators, whether it's at universities, K through 12, community college, technical schools, every day, that still think, oh, AI shouldn't be used in the classroom. And, that I thought we were past, right? But we're not. So I'm still hearing, trepidation in my conversations within education.
Interesting. Do you feel
Sad.
like it's quite refreshing to hear that? I'm not going to lie, because you know, technological evolution is moving at such an aggressive rate nowadays that you can't seem to come up for air. So it's quite nice to hear that sort of thing. But in the same breath, I am I have to be realistic. You either adopt it or you get left behind. And for everyone to have equal opportunity in this world, I just feel like you need to somewhat be a part of the conversation and to try and understand it at its very minimum. to be able to have those opportunities in life. We are further along in that maturity curve. You look at quantum computing as well. Will that ever actually become a legitimate solution to problems we have in this day and age? I don't know, but I think it's a real shame, as well as it's fresh to hear that, to hear schools saying we don't necessarily feel like AI needs to be in this classroom. Do you feel like that's maybe a pressure of media? Do you feel like that's a pressure of the family of the students in
Well,
the schools?
what I'm finding too, it's different by country, right? So if you look at countries in the Middle East, they're readily adopting AI across, across the citizenship, with students, within the government. There's a alignment that we're focusing on AI anywhere from, being 5 years old to 105, right? And then you look at countries like the US where there's more of a concern of, will this take my job? Um, you know, if I use it, is it cheating? Other countries are way past that, right? And I think it's going to develop into almost like a new world order where it's going to be AI first countries, AI early adopters will be potential world powers where maybe that wasn't the case 5 years ago. I mean, you've got countries like, in the Middle East, let's say example, Qatar or Bahrain, that are putting together programs to educate the citizens, to provide them access to these tools, to make them all AI proficient. And that should be, that really should be the focus in EMEA and North America,
Yeah.
to be able to get on board together. Otherwise, you know, 2 years, a year, 5 years, it's not going to be the same way it is today.
But the thing is, when I'm driving back and forth from the office, I listen to something called LBC. Not sure
Mhm.
if you listen to LBC yourself, but it's a radio station
Oh,
that sort of covers political topics, current affairs. It's a good listen for half an hour. And there was one particular topic where they was talking about digital identification. I guess an equivalent to like digital passports or digital ID. Ultimately, if you were to be stopped, you can present this kind of this identification. And they were, bringing up the debate of, is it right? Is it wrong? Should it be should it be implemented? Should it not be? And there's this one particular elderly person who rang in and simply said, I have no forms of digital media. I have an old Nokia phone, which, I could probably play snakes and ladders on it, and that's about it. And I feel like sometimes that is like the only thing that I'd need to direct anyone to if someone was to say, is AI going to take my job? As we come to the business end of this podcast today, if you could give one piece of advice to students or professionals preparing for an AI driven future, what would it be?
so I think one of the things you need to do or could do is, first of all, day one, let's say, and I have this conversation with my 11-year-old daughter and 12-year-old son, where the beginning is download or use an AI tool. It doesn't matter whether it's Mistral or XAI, Anthropic, OpenAI, ChatGPT, is familiarize yourself with the capabilities by using it. Second thing is, what I did was listen to a podcast just like this. I had some available time in the car. What I did was I listened to those podcasts, multiple podcasts. There's a lot of great ones out there just like this, and they can serve as a great educational resource to be able to enhance your use of the tool. And then the third thing is, starting your journey with basic use cases. One of them being starting your journey by using AI instead of Google search. Obviously, you can use Google search now with Gemini providing amazing results. Um, but that's a great way to be able to use it with a similar way that you're using Google. But don't stop there, right? I think it's important to use to not just use it that way, because a lot of people do. Second is to use it for strategy. Recently I had a conversation where someone said, one of the things I did to understand the power of AI is just asked it to tell me about me, right? And it will have an opinion. They said it was very close to saying, well, you're like this, you do this is your style, because it does learn that over time. I haven't done it yet because I'm kind of nervous about what it'll say, but those are some of the early things you can do in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot to be said about AI safety. It's not to say that you're going to be putting your kids in danger, not at all. Far from it. But I think it says a lot about if, of course, parents are going to allow and permit their kids to utilize these types of tools, which I think is a good idea for educational purposes and more. I don't have any kids myself, I must admit, but I think it says a lot for the accountability of these developers of said models, around AI safety, to ensure that they are platforms that are, as I said, safe to use. All right. I think as well, one piece of advice I would give to anyone who is utilizing, Perplexity or ChatGPT, for example, DeepSeek, is the better the prompts and the more simple the prompts, the better the outcomes that you will receive. Have you asked these models to evaluate your prompt capabilities and to give you feedback? So yeah, I would always recommend that. Well, look, Mike, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on today. A really fascinating conversation around AI education, notably within the Earth observation space. Your experience is fantastic, and I'm sure those who are watching now, really appreciate you sparing the time to come and speak with me today. Do you have any final words for us?
Yeah, well, I would love to say, if anybody is looking for a role or a new role in Earth observation, to call Sam. He's
Thank you.
he's the person he's the person who knows more about what's going on out there in the EO world, more than most, because you talk to everybody, right? You talk to everybody about what their needs are and new placements, what their growth is. So yeah, definitely call Sam. And then
Thank you.
if you call me, if you're educational institution, if you're a country, if you're a Fortune 100 company looking to upskill their citizens, we have programs in place to be able to make sure everybody has the right EO AI skills, AI specifically, to be able to participate in this new economy. So yeah, thanks,
Absolutely.
Sam. I really appreciate it.
Hello, and thank you for watching today's episode of Earth Observed, powered by DeepRec.ai. If you're interested in joining me for an episode of your own to discuss a topic of your choice, do get in contact with me. And of course, if you are looking to scale your team within geospatial, Earth data, or atmospheric AI, please do get in contact. I'd love to understand how I can support you. Until next time, have a great day.